Hi there, I'm Paul Whitehead, British artist living in America. 1970, I was living in London, and at that time I was doing lots of pen and ink drawings, pen and ink with watercolour, very sort of pastoral. And I had a show in London, in a gallery in the West End of London, and I can't remember to this day, it was either the Genesis producer or Peter Gabriel came to the show and they saw my work. And they said, you know, we're making a record. We think your work is perfect for our record cover. Would you do our record cover? Well, I'd never heard of Genesis. They were a new band. They were like 20 years old, you know. So I said, yeah, okay. So I got together with primarily Peter Gabriel. He played me some of the music, and I listened to it, and he told me what the songs were about, gave me the lyrics, and I read through it, and a lot of it was very romantic, pastoral imagery, you know, kings and queens and love stories and so on. So I said, oh, I think I've got the perfect idea for you. And they also wanted to have a theme of like innocence and beauty being infringed on somehow. So here was this couple in love, but something was infringing on it. So I went away and I thought about it, and I thought the perfect idea was to have Cupid infringing on this royal couple. Here's this royal couple, they're looking out on the world, looking out on their kingdom through a window, and Cupid's kind of creeping up behind them. He's about to make one of them fall in love and go crazy. So they love the idea. So I started to draw and paint it. And this is the image here. As you can see, I got about halfway across to this point here, and it's all within the thing we were talking about, the king and queen looking on their kingdom. Here's Cupid sneaking up on them. And Peter Gabriel called me. And he said, you know, the idea that we've been talking about, I don't think it's going to work anymore because I've written a new song. So I said, oh, really? I'm halfway done, you know, I'm halfway finished. Well, the new song's really violent, and I don't think that the image that we've been working on would work. So I was like, what? I've done this, it's probably been 3 weeks' work, you know. So it was like the artist in me got to work, and it was like, well, how can I use what I've already done and not throw it away and make it useful for the new image? So I thought about it, and I'd just been to see a show in London of an artist called Marino, an Italian artist, and what he did was, with a razor blade, he put slashes into canvas, and that was all he did. That was his art. And I went, that's what I'll do. I'll take the painting and slash it you know, with a knife. So I said to the band, this is what we'll do. We'll still keep the title Trespass, which is the title that came from Cupid infringing on their privacy, but we'll violate the painting with a knife. And they said, what? You really going to do that? And I said, yeah, it'd be great. So I did it, and it was very dramatic. When this is in the record store, you only see this half of the painting. You don't see the knife. You see the slash, but you don't see what it's going to. So when it was in the record stores, I don't know whether you remember that there used to be record bins. You used to go through the record bins looking at records. You'd come across this, you'd pull it out, and your curiosity would say, what's the rest of this like? And it was also one of those deals where people said that the record cover was as good as the music. They said very often they'd buy a record because of the cover, and they'd get it home, and it wasn't, you know, there was one track that was good, the rest was rubbish. They said, but this was actually as good as the record, and it was very thought-provoking. So that was my first one. Yeah, it was the same size as this, 12 inches by 24, and folded in the middle. And what we used to do, this was the first time, I took it in. We had a studio booked with a photographer so he could take a still picture of it after I'd slashed it. And of course we all stood around, are you really going to do it? I mean, you only get one chance, you know, don't blow it. And we talked about that. and one of the guys brought a bottle of champagne. So I did the slash, and it turned out good, and we all had a glass of champagne. And actually that became a tradition. Every time I did a cover for them, we'd have like a little unveiling and champagne. Champagne and cake, it got to. I mean, it's funny, my relationship with musicians is very good, but it's also strange in a way, because musicians don't have the respect for images that they do for music, right? So to them, it was just okay to throw this away, it wasn't any good anymore, throw it away, do something else. But being a lazy artist, I didn't want to waste it, and we talked about that. I said, no, I think we can make it more dramatic, just by the fact that it is a very peaceful, pastoral kind of image. To then violate that would make it even more. I thought of spilling ink on it, or maybe burning the corner of it or something, something that was violating the image. I think this turned out rather good. Peter Gabriel has the original, and I haven't seen it for 40-something years. So then we come to the second Genesis cover. Having worked with the guys and established a really nice working relationship with them, they said, okay, well, we're making another record. They played me some of the tracks, and one of the standout tracks was called The Musical Box, which was a story. Peter Gabriel's songs are always quite narrative. They told a whole story. And it was a story of a Victorian house where there was a musical box, and it was haunted by an old uncle. And so the kids would play with this musical box, and the uncle would come out, and he was very sort of, evil and wicked and so on. So it was very Gothic, kind of English, Victorian kind of thing. So I said, okay, well, I think sort of an Alice in Wonderland thing would be kind of good, Okay, so we talked about that. And somehow we got around to the subject of croquet. Because croquet is a game in England where it's only played by the aristocrats in England. And it's very genteel, and it takes place on a lawn, and but the idea of the game is to screw up your opponent, to knock your ball in such a position that he can't score. So there's an element of malice to it. So he said, oh, that's perfect. We'll use that as the story of the girl who's haunted by the uncle from the musical box, and she kills her brother, and she plays croquet with his head. So, great idea. Very, very, English, Gothic, Victorian horror film kind of thing. But this is like 1970, and the slasher films hadn't come out by then. So I drew up the sketch, and we said, well, obviously we'll have the nurse from the nursery coming to stop her playing with her brother's head. And here's the uncle lurking in the background. So, okay, so I started to paint it. And I did a couple of trips, and I showed them how it was going. And they liked it. They added a few things here and there. They wanted the Venus de Milo in there. This is the house where all these horrors took place. So once again, it took about a month, and I was done. I took it in to show them, and they said, oh yeah, it's great, but it doesn't look old enough. It looked too new, So I said, well, you know what I could do? I could take some varnish, some real deep brown, like nautical varnish, the stuff they varnish ships with. And I could varnish it with like that. It's like honey colored, and that would make it look old. So, okay, great. So I did that. And I lived in Norfolk at the time, which was in the country. I varnished the painting, and I put it outside to dry. And I swear every bug in the county decided to come and settle on the painting. And I saw this happening, and I was trying to shoo them away, but in the end I gave up. And if you look closely, particularly up here and down here, there's flies embedded in the varnish. And once again, it was like, oh no, what are we going to do with this? So I thought, well, what the hell, I'll take it in and show them and explain what happened. And they loved it. They thought it was great. It added to the age of the thing. And in fact, sometimes when you take a painting out of a frame, there are flies and bugs and things in there that get inside and they die. So it was a success. And then the final thing I did, I added some age to it. Added cracks, you know. And once again, this folded down here. So all you saw in the record store was the girl and the nurse, and she's playing with her brother's head. So once again, it was quite shocking. They were very theatrical on stage. He'd wear a mask of the old man and he was kind of menacing, and it really broke them. And they also found out that they were #1 in Italy, which they didn't even know about Italy. But someone said, you know that record of yours, Nursery Crime, it's #1 in Italy. So they went, ooh, maybe we should go to Italy. Yeah, it was their breakout record. The third album of Genesis was Foxtrot. Now you may notice from the last cover, the name Genesis is a certain style. And it was part of the previous painting. Well, they decided that they liked it so much they wanted to make it their logo. So they basically took this piece out of my painting and it became their logo, which was okay by me, you know, it was like flattering in a way, right? So then we came to this one and they said, well, we want the same logo on this one. So I said, okay, so incorporate it in this one. The story behind this was we'd done the previous painting, you may remember, about croquet, which was an English upper class sort of game. And I think we're in a pub having a drink and so on. We decided we wanted to have a go at fox hunting, because fox hunting was the other totally useless English aristocratic sport. Oscar Wilde said it was the despicable in pursuit of the uneatable, which was kind of summed it up. So okay, so that was, we decided to put the whole idea of the record into this idea of fox hunting somehow. So they gave me all the music, they gave me the lyrics, and off I went. The trick was to do a new take on fox hunting. So I decided that, you know, one of the things about fox hunting is the fox is always very cunning. They always outfox the hunters somehow. They escape or get away. So I said, well, hey, I have an idea. A couple of my friends had been to America in bands, and they'd come back and they'd brought this phrase back with them, she's a real fox, a foxy lady. We never heard that in England in those days. So I said, that's a great idea. How about a fox? And the way that he's escaped the fox hunters, he's in drag. He's put on a red dress and he's running away from them. Oh, great idea. So then I listened to the song a little more, and one of the songs on the album is called Supper's Ready. A very long piece, it's 23 minutes long. And it goes into a part called The Apocalypse. And so I decided that the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse would be 4 fox hunters. And I don't remember the 4 horsemen. The death rides a pale horse. There's pestilence and famine and all the rest of it. So that was incorporated into the picture. Then I decided, just for a little gag, we'd do like a reference to the previous cover. And you see in here is a little miniature in the distance of the previous cover, which people liked. And they were just getting kind of real big. They were beginning to tour a lot. So up here I put a Holiday Inn, because I figured there was going to be lots of Holiday Inns in their future. And there's the croquet mallet from the previous record is floating in the sea. There's references to things that were going on in England at the time as well. There was a big discussion in 1972 about the nuclear submarines in England. They were based in England and they would go on patrol, And the English people didn't like it because they figured if the Russians were going to strike England, the first thing they would hit would be the nuclear submarines. So we'd kind of get it first, you know. So there's a nuclear sub over here you see floating. This was to do with, you know, save the whales and save the life in the ocean. We put lots of little political things in there. And once again, it was a big success. And we didn't have a title for it. They kept saying, well, what are we going to call this record? I mean, we've got all these different tracks on it. And I just, off the top of my head, said, Foxtrot. And boom, that was it. There's references here. This is from the song Supper's Ready. 6 saintly men marching across the beach. There's lots of references. A guy with his head in the sand here. And the final thing I did is I figured the best way to have the fox cheat the fox hunter was for him to float on a piece of ice on the sea. And it was a success because nobody knew what it was about. It was very mysterious, and it was like, what the hell is this all about? And they were beginning to hear that phrase, she's a fox, she's a real fox, you know. And most of the questions I think that I heard or I got asked were from music reviewers. They review the record and they'd ask me, what's this all about? So I'd go through the explanation. I'd also go to gigs. I'd go to see Genesis, you know, and fans would ask me. They all had their own theory. I've had some incredible theories over the years of what it's about. I mean, you wouldn't believe what people invent for themselves, you know. But yeah, it's actually the dress was from a cover of Cosmopolitan magazine, which I still have a copy of. And she's quite a babe for a fox. Or of course, now the people are older. I go to these festivals around the world, right, and I meet Genesis fans from all nationalities, all age groups. And the guys are the most interesting about my age, maybe a little younger than me. They grew up, this was their music, you know. They'd sit there for hours and look at this stuff and maybe a bit stoned, and they'd invent all these stories for themselves, what it was about, which was great because it kind of added to the myth of the record, you know. And they'd ask me, well, and they'd tell me sometimes, oh, this is because of this, right? And I say, oh, no, no. And they'd have a whole story. They'd tell me, you know, there was a group in Italy in Turin, I remember. These guys would gather every Friday afternoon. They were like school kids, you know, teenagers. They'd gather every Friday afternoon and they'd have like a Genesis listening session. And they'd play all the records. And some of them said to me that they learned how to speak English from reading the lyrics. They'd read the lyrics and they'd listen to it on the record, and that was their first knowledge of English, which was kind of interesting. But yeah, I can imagine these guys, you know, what is this about? Why is this in there? And of course you put things in there to get that, to generate that, you know. Yeah, and I have a website, paulwhitehead.com, where all my stuff is available. I've done 160 record covers over the years. And I would think probably 20 are available as limited editions.